and welcome to the live webinar. Today my name is Richard Payne. I'm a trainer here at Fitch Learning, and today we're going to be talking through the CFA exams. I'll be talking through the CFA exam itself, and then I'll give you a few exam tips, things that you should be thinking about when it comes to prepare, and we're going to work through what we at Fitch Learning have identified as the 10 top common pitfalls for this exam and what you should do to avoid them. Now, I know that a lot of people will be logging in from different areas, different parts of the world. So if you could very quickly just post your name, say where you're coming from. I'll have a quick look. We'll have a look at where everyone is dialing in from today. And this is what we will use throughout this chat in order to post questions that I'll answer as we're coming through. Great. Okay, well, let's get started then. Welcome from wherever you are, wherever you're watching me in from. And I'm going to make the assumption that the people who are dialing in this are starting to think about whether they should or they've already booked for the December 2017 sit-in. Now is the perfect time to be thinking about this. Because, as we're going to say, you should spend about 5 to 6 months preparing for this exam. So now's the time to start thinking about that decision to sit the exam or not, if you haven't already come to it. Now, when it comes to what we will be looking at today, we're going to talk through those top 10 common pitfalls of studying. We'll talk through how Fitch Learning, how we as a faculty, how our products might help you prepare for this exam, and then I'll take some questions at the end. Perfect. Now let's talk about the exam itself very quickly. All I'm going to say is when it comes to registering for the exam, if you haven't already, then the key date that you're going to want to think about is the 16th of August, because that is when fees are going to go up. That will be the end of standard registry. If at that point you still haven't come to a decision, then the final deadline that you want to be looking out for the December sit-in is going to be the 13th of September. So these are going to be our key dates when it comes to registering for this exam. What about the exam itself? Well, you're looking, unfortunately, at within a day, 2 3-hour sit-ins. You'll get a break for lunch, but then you'll be straight back in for the afternoon session. And within the 3-hour sit-in, you'll be expected to do 120 questions. And this is the standard, around 1.5 minutes a question. Some you'll be able to answer almost instantly. Some will take 2 or 3 minutes to work through. 3 options will be available for you. You'll have A through to C, 1 correct answer, and the good news is that there is no negative marking. So please always put an answer in, move on, and you can come back if you've got time at the end to correct anything, look at anything that you need to more. So let's get into the top 10 common pitfalls of the exam. I'm going to be working through these, but first I want to say the pass mark for the last 3 sit-ins, so not pass mark, pass percentage for candidates, was around 43%. So these top 10 common pitfalls are the ones that we at Fitch Learning have identified through candidates that we've seen, and these are the ones that stop people performing as well as maybe they could have if they had spent their time focused in the right way. So let's start with the amount of hours that you should be expected to study. We're looking at around 300 hours of study. Now, where the 300 hours comes from originally is CFA did a survey with their candidates and had or asked them for the number of hours they studied and how they performed. And what they found on average were those candidates who did pass studied on average around 310 hours. Those who didn't pass the exam studied an average of around 290. So we can see that there is a correlation between the hours spent studying and the success rate of the candidates. Now, 300 hours is a guide. For some of you, it will be less. For some of you, more. If you've got an accounting background, if you feel comfortable with FRA, then it's going to be less. But the idea for these hours is that you should be spreading them over around a 6-month period. 6-month periods, if we spread these, we're looking at around 11 or 12 hours of study a day. Now, this will start off less than this and it will build up towards the end of your exam. But what we don't want to end up with is with 150 or 200 hours left to go in the last month. Now, if we're thinking about 12 hours a week, I mean, we're thinking about roughly 1.5 hours, an hour every single day. Now, what we want to do is find out ways that you can carve out little chunks of time where you can study every day consistently. It might be that you get one of the CFA books and you just read a little bit of it, half an hour during lunchtime, half an hour in the evening or in the morning, every single day. But we don't want to waste any spare time that's available. And we have, if you want to look at a tool on our portal on the Cognition, which splits things down into bite-sized chunks. So you can spend 5 minutes during a break just going through a question, looking at new material. I have candidates who will make sure that every single lunchtime, they make sure that they go through half an hour to an hour's worth of questions while they're eating. Let's get into the habit of splitting these questions up into bite-sized chunks. The study plan. I think this is one of the key things that you need to look at for this exam. Now, if you're like me, if you are disorganized, then you might end up in a situation where you haven't thought about what you need to cover until it's almost too late, until we're almost approaching the exam and you've realized that you've not really looked into a couple of key topics. Now, if you're organized, this won't be a problem for you. You can work things out in your own diary. You can work out ways to fit things around your schedule. But if you're like me, you need a tool to help you. And our Cognition tool will help you map out study plans around your available time. If you fall behind it, it will squeeze more going forward and it will adjust so that when it comes to that last month, to the crucial part of the studying, you don't have too much left to do. I think that this is one of the mistakes that is quite easy to trick yourself into doing, where people will look at a big area like FRA and then they'll just choose a couple of big topics and they'll say, I'll focus on those. If anything else comes up, then I'll guess in the exam. That is a dangerous game to play with this exam in particular, because the CFA Institute can test anywhere across the syllabus, and they will. You won't know what topics will come up. You can't look at past exams because they don't release them for 1 or 2 and compare that to what you think might come up in the future. So what you need to do is learn the entire syllabus. Now, there is a tendency of candidates to focus on the areas that they're good at and just to build that up as a strength. And there's nothing wrong with having strong areas. But where you should be focusing your time are those areas where you struggle. Now, the online tool Cognition will monitor your performance as you're going through. And depending how you perform on questions, then you will get to spend more time or have more questions on those areas. I think this is one of the biggest things to focus, ethics. Now, it might be that you score so well on the other areas that you don't need ethics. You don't need to do particularly well in it. I'm going to say it might be, but I'd say it's extremely unlikely. There are 2 reasons why ethics is key to this exam. Number 1, we are talking about the second biggest topic after FRA. 15% of the exam is on ethics. On top of that, when CFA look at your exam score, and if you are around the borderline of pass, then the ultimate decision whether you pass or fail the exam is based on your ethics score. So 2 key reasons why ethics should be a focus for every candidate going through these exams. Now here's one of my exam tips. For me, my favourite way to study ethics is to get the CFA Institute curriculum book. And in the ethics section, under every different standard, at the end, they give you a couple of worked examples to work through. I would work through those worked examples, and by work through, read through them. Try and understand through practice why one question might be right and why another question might be wrong. So work through those worked examples, read through them, and then once you've gone through those, you've got a bit of understanding, then approach the questions which you'll be able to see on our portal, that you'll be able to see through our mock exams. What we don't want to end up doing is saving the beauty that is ethics right to the end, and in the last week, while you've got everything else going through your mind, you're trying to read through all the different pages and examples on the ethics score. Now there are 3 stages when it comes to our exams. Number 1, you need to learn the material. And we have question banks, we have the material itself if you're studying from the CFA book. That will help you learn the content, understand the content. But once you've understood the content, the next key thing that you're going to need to be able to do is work on being able to recall and apply what you've learnt. And this is where question practice will come in handy. You've understood how to calculate a derivative, how to work out a derivative. What you need to do is apply it in lots of different situations, because there is no one set way that the CFA will test you on these papers, on these questions. I think the final stage when it comes to this is getting used to sitting down in one location for 3 hours straight or twice during the day. I mean, it is physically exhausting, it is draining. And you need to prepare from that physically, mentally. You need to get used to techniques that you're going to use during the exam to keep you going through those papers. Now here's another Richard Payne exam tip. 3-hour paper, please do not sit there for the whole thing. Now, when I was sitting these, I made sure that I got up every single hour at least, maybe every 45 minutes. And I spent 5 minutes just grabbing water or walking around, getting some blood into the legs, going and having a toilet break, coming back. It is that idea that you will move around, you'll keep yourself refreshed and hydrated. And you'll find that the candidates who don't do that, when it comes to that second paper, are starting to feel tired, they're starting to feel fatigued, dehydrated, and it will impact their score in the second paper. So you're going to sit 2 papers, make sure that you are used to sitting them and you know exactly what exam technique you're going to use during them. Now, if you are in a location where we teach our exam training, what you can have are invigilated mocks to help you practice. And that will get you used to the pressure and the situation during the day. For those of you who want to do remote learning, then we will release mocks online And what I would recommend is that you spend time sitting a 3-hour paper as a 3-hour paper, and maybe once go through 2 of them during the day, just so you get used to the strain that that provides. Pacing your study. What we need to make sure is that you are exam ready for the exam day. Now, what we said is around 11 to 12 hours every single week. But that might start up less, and it will build up as you get nearer to the exam. Something to be thinking about now, if you can. Can you get the week of work before the exam? Because that last week will be when you're really feeling the pressure, when you really want to get questions done. So I also want to point out, don't overload it. Don't spend too long going through questions. We see a thing here at Fitch Learning with our candidates, sometimes called question fatigue. And this is when people are cramming right at the end of their study, and they just want to hit as many questions as they can. And because they're hitting so many questions up to the day of the exam, when it comes to the actual questions, when it comes to the actual exam, we find that they're a little bit fatigued from doing too many questions. They're not reading through the questions properly. They're skipping through the answers, skipping to the answers. And we find that they make lots of silly mistakes that they wouldn't have made if they had less question fatigue. So we want to be ready for that exam day, and I would recommend having the week off before the exam day, and you will probably build up on the first half of that week. But what we will then do is build back down so that you feel refreshed, you feel ready to go for what is a pretty grueling exam come the exam day. The calculator. So, only 2 calculators allowed within this exam. You've got the Texas Instrument BA2 Plus, and you have a HP calculator that's allowed. And here at Fitch Learning, we recommend the BA2 Plus. I mean, your calculator should never be further than 6 feet away from me. I have mine here. I sleep with this thing. I brush my teeth next to it. It is always nearby. And this calculator, the more that you use it earlier on, the more it will become second nature, the more time you will find that you have to spend on those areas that you're struggling with in the exam. I think the candidates that pick this up too late during their exam preparation will find that it's too late to learn all of the different functions that this has available to it, such as we can work out our bond valuations or payments on bonds, we can discount back cash flows, work out IRRs at press of a button, convert interest rates. We can do such a variety of things with this calculator that it is worth getting used to right now. Now I'm guessing some of you are sitting there and you've got one of these by you. Some of you haven't got yet to ordering it yet. But let's quickly talk about the setup, a couple of tips before you get going and before you start your studies. And let's start with the BA2 Plus, the setup. So when it comes to the setup, what we're going to do is, number one, we're going to press this yellow second button. And then we're going to press the dot. And that's going to take us into our format. Now let's start off with which format we should have. If you press the down button, which is at the top of the calculator, and keep on working your way down, you're going to see one of 2 options. You will either see the letters CHN, or you will see the letters AOS. Stop where you see either of those letters. This is the way that the calculator operates. Now, CHN means that the order that you type things into your calculator will be the order it calculates. This is not the setup we want for CFA. We want to use standard math operation. We want to use BODMAS. Brackets first, then we have our orders, then we have our divisors and multipliers, then plus and subtract, addition and subtract. So what you need to do to get your calculator into AOS, and you need to do this anytime you get a new calculator or you reset the calculator, is once I'm on, if it says CHN, I'm going to press the second button, and then I'm going to press the enter button. And what that will do is it will change it. So that's just changed mine to CHN. To change it back, I press second, and I press this enter button, which gets me into set, switches it back to AOS. This is where I want to be. The other thing about calculator setup is if you press the down button and you get to where it says des, for how many decimal places do you want, I think depends on your preference. Here at Fitch Learning we have two options. You want enough decimal places that you're always working to an appropriate level of significance. And the CFA exam can give you answers pretty close together. So if you round too early, especially when we're talking about stuff like bond calculations, you can end up with the wrong answer. So what many tutors like to do is set it to 5 decimal places. To do this, press 5, and then we're going to press enter, the enter at the button. So I'm going to put 5, and then I'm going to hit the button for enter. What I like to do personally is I like it to show me how many ever decimal places there are. If there's only 1 decimal place, show me 1. If there are 9, show me 9. So, to have how many decimal places there are, you need to set this to 9 and press enter. 9, enter. That's my preference. Now the point is, everybody has their own preferences when it comes to the calculator, and this is the key tool when it comes to passing this exam. So if you start early, you can try whether you like 5 decimal places or 9, but the idea is you then give yourself enough time to get used to this. And what's better than having 1 calculator in the exam? Having 2, just in case you have a mishap or you drop or you misplace one of them. Now for any more tips on the calculator, please have a look at our online calculator guide. The link's just there. It's there for you to have a look through. I think one of the key tools that often gets overlooked when it comes to this exam is getting support from other people sitting this exam. Now, you can get an idea of where other candidates are from chatting them, so you can benchmark roughly where you are against others. But the other advantage is that when you come across an area, and sometimes it can be a minute detail that you get stuck on, you don't know how to move on, or it's there in the back of your mind, you don't want to move on without it. And a quick discussion with one of your peers, a fellow candidate, can have them explain to you how they understood it. And it might be that they have a very nice explanation, a nice way of summarizing things that you can just move on very quickly afterwards. But from those of you who are sitting on our lines or studying online, what we have is full-time faculty of CFA instructors like myself who will be online on our help desk, which is available through the portal, to answer any questions, any problems that you might have throughout the course of your study. Now, we're going to quickly have a look at our last couple of slides, our last couple of tips, which sort of recap on what we've seen. I mean, too much cramming. You cannot cram the 300 hours into the last month. There are 6 curriculum books from the CFA, which splits out into into 10 sections in level 1. The 10 sections then split out into 18 different study sessions, which split out into about 60 different readings. So we end up with this huge amount of material that you don't want to leave crammed into the last couple of months. The other thing that you don't want to do is just learn the answers to the questions that you've seen come up via Fitch or via the CFA books themselves. The exam will test from everywhere, and they will test in ways that you will not expect. So you need to learn the material behind the questions. Now, one of the best ways of doing that is via our online portal. The great thing about the Cognition portal is that it will give you more or less questions depending on its assessment of how deep your understanding is on the topic, how well you're doing on the questions themselves. But the key thing that I want you to take away from here is that you need to spread out your study. And finally, our final exam tip that we're going to have a quick look at, pressure of the exam day. Now, it's worth saying that you'll walk into a hall, there will be thousands of people around you, you will feel pressure. I felt pressure when I sat them, everybody does. Whether they look nervous or not, they are feeling the pressure of this exam. And just feel that that's normal. Everybody goes through the exact same thing. And you're going to see some questions, there will be at least a question in there, I can guarantee, where you have no idea what the question is. Or maybe it twigs something in your memory, but you don't know how to go about answering it. You don't have to get every single question right. There will be questions you don't know. Have a guess. There's no negative marking in the exam itself. What I would recommend doing, and this is one of my tips that I say is really handy, is to start with the area where you feel most strong. Now, I'm an accountant by my original trade, so I start with FRA, and I work with that and I use it to build confidence in the exam. I think that we have a question coming through. So, a question regarding materials. Good to learn from the Schweizer notes primarily, apart from ethics. Refer back to CFA curriculum if you get stuck on the Schweizer explanations. Thoughts on this? I guess my thoughts on that is what Schweizer does is it provides a summary. And it will summarize a topic and it will boil it down a bit. But it won't cover necessarily everything that you need to cover. Now, if you are in an area where you feel particularly strong, so you're an accountant, you feel comfortable with FRA, then sometimes it's worth having a look at the summary for FRA, just so that you can make sure that everything that's covered you understand. But what I wouldn't recommend is avoiding the full readings. So if you're going to study straight from the CFA books, fine, but make sure that you get a broad coverage of all the content. And if you are using the portal, this will do it for you. It will make sure that you have covered everything within a topic. So I guess my thoughts on that is, with a strong topic, fine, you can get away with doing the short version. But certainly on those topics where you need to do more work, the ones where you feel less comfortable, I would make sure that you have a broad coverage of everything by either using the CFA books or using a tool to help you learn, such as Cognition. Great. Okay, what else to do when it comes to the exam day? Get a good night's sleep. I think that is something that often gets overlooked. People try and study the night before. The day before the exam, I wouldn't recommend doing many, if any, actual question practice. If I were you, and my tip is that last day I would spend some time relaxing, trying to calm myself down. I know that I had to when I did it. And I would also spend some time reading through maybe some old questions that I found difficult. But I wouldn't spend time looking at new questions. I wouldn't spend time stressing myself out for the exam itself. And we're going to start early with this exam. So we should feel a lot better when it comes to close to the exam. Another one, especially if you're sitting in a location where there will be a lot of people sitting, plan your journey. I mean, there will be so many candidates making the exact same journey. It is hot on public transport, it is cramped. Everyone's trying to squeeze a little bit of room so they can do some reading themselves. And make sure that you keep your exam tickets safe, your passport safe, because those will be key to your entry to the exam. There won't be another way that they let you in without those. Finally, make sure that you read the policy of the test centre you're going through. And you've got to follow the rules to the letter. There's no negotiating. There's no, common sense. Can we get away with this? They follow the rules strictly. And if you don't meet those, you don't get to sit the exam. Okay, I have another quick question. Perfect. So we're just talking about ways that you can look at studying early. There are plenty of ways. And yes, what you can do is you can look at registering for the online portal and start immediately. That is a good way to get some access to the materials. When it comes into the paying part, I would probably have a look at the website itself or contact us offline. Maybe not something for this discussion. But what I would try to do, if you're trying to get into studying nice and early, is you can get access to the portal. You can start working through some of the questions, the material in that portal. And as we'll see in a second, you can also get a trial on the portal, which will give you a chance to have a look at some of the materials early and get used to whether you think that this portal's for you, whether it's giving you materials in the way that you like. Okay, I've got another perfect question coming as we come to look at the classroom courses. So this is from someone who's thinking about doing an evening course and wants to know whether it improves the chance of passing. What's the typical pass rate for Fitch classes? Now, what I'll say for Fitch methods, whether you come to our classes, whether you study online, number one, no training provider is allowed to provide their pass rates. That is a CFA rule. They don't allow it just because they can't audit the results to make sure what we're telling you is accurate. But what I'd like to say is we are very proud of our pass rates for Fitch Learning. Now, the benefits that you can get from the different style of studying, what I will say is it depends on what type of learner you are. Evening courses, I regularly teach on evening courses. And what I like about evening courses is it works around your work schedule. And it makes sure from an early stage that you are covering the key parts of the content. Now, the portal will also do that to a level as well, and you can fit that into your work schedule. But what I like about having something like an evening course is that I know twice a week I've got a location where I go to, where I study, and then from that I can have a look at, well, I covered these big areas, I feel uncomfortable with this area, and we can go back to the portal, to Cognition, to have a look at that. So if you are in one of our locations that's on screen now, so London, New York, Toronto, Dubai, Singapore, then we have our classroom courses. We've got evening, there are weekend, there are daytime, there are intensive courses where they will cram them into every day for a week or so. If you go to one of those classroom courses, you get automatic access to the portal, to Cognition. And on top of that, we then have review courses where we go back, briefly recapping the material, and we go into exam-style questions. There are mock exams, you can go to class mock exams, and what we're going to say as well is we also have the portal, especially for those of you who don't happen to be in one of those locations. where we have a full classroom course. Now, the idea is that you get a broad coverage of all the topics, and the portal will make sure that you cover everything. You get access to material instantly that you can work on online. And on top of this, I'll say, for those of you looking to eke out, an extra 20 minutes of study a day, an extra half an hour, if you're in London, if you're in New York, probably an hour and a half on your commutes, well, you also get access to an app which you can use offline, and you can work through questions and material on your commute so that you can fit that study around your busy schedule. Now, study that fits around you. Remember, we said it's good to have a study plan, and the portal will give you a study plan if you're like me and heinously disorganized. But let's have a quick look at the portal. And this is what we do. We've broken out the different parts of the portals, the different sections that you can go into a particular topic. Let's have a look at one of my favorites, fixed income. And what we can do is we can go in, I can resume the topic. That's saying how far along I am. And you'll have to forgive that I'm live streaming this. We have videos from our different tutors, so that's one of my colleagues here in London, Tom, that will take you through an area. Looks through, he's taking us through money markets versus capital market securities. Then after the video, there will be a test to see, well, how well did you understand that short video, that 5-minute clip? So the typical tenor of a capital market security at issuance. And so you can answer, you can submit the question, and it will give you instant feedback on how you're performing. Now, it will keep track of how you perform on different sections, and the better that you're performing, the quicker it will allow you to move on to other material. The more difficulty you have with a section, the more questions that you'll have. Now, what else do we have available to us on the portal? If you don't want to work through the structured method, well, all the videos, all the different sections are available in the library to work through. If you want to review where you are, what progress you've had, then there is a handy summary of how you are performing, of what you've finished, what you've got left to do. And this is looking, it's a big section FRA, doesn't look like this person's got through as much as they need to. The last thing I want to talk about on the portal is the schedule itself. And remember, I said, you're like me, if you happen to be, then this can be a handy way of working out what you have to do. And what we're going to find is if you are online via the portal, for some of this, we will be able to get access to live tuition. So we'll have people who are training in different areas, and we'll have webinars that come up as they go through the material. Now, that is just a cognition portal. It's a little bit of detail what there is. Remember that there is a trial available if you want to see what the material's like, number one, and also whether you like the portal, whether it fits, and whether it works for you. So this is just a summary of what Fitch Learning can provide. Classroom, our online tools, including our mobile app that you can use during a commute. We have a faculty of full-time instructors just to talk through and teach the CFA exam, and they're accessible via the online help desk wherever you happen to be in the world. Fantastic. Let's very quickly have a look at the final steps. Here's the link if you want to sign up and you want to have a go on the Cognition portal. Have a click on that, it will take you through. If you still want to find out more about Fitch Learning, what we can provide, don't listen to us, have a look at past delegates. And we have a link to what people have put as their feedback. And finally, for all of you tuning in for this live info session, there is a unique discount link that will be sent out after this session that will give you 10% off when it comes. Fantastic. Now I'm going to say any final questions, and otherwise I will close this down. But I will just hold this on, and I'll see if there are any more questions quickly filtering through. Doesn't look like there is. So thank you so much for tuning today. All the best with your study, and I hope that you have a lovely day or evening depending on where you are.